Welcome to this webinar on Adopt, Enable and Scale GitHub Copilot. I'm Fokko Wegens and together with me is
Rob.
And together we will provide this webinar to you. Feel free to ask questions in chat. If you have any, we'll try to answer all of them. And yeah, let's get started.
Yeah, let's take it away. Well, we can of course then skip this, but this is what we do, right? We're both DevOps consultants and GitHub trainers, so we help our customers doing everything that we can with GitHub. So whether that is focused on the Copilot part, where we help to accelerate basically SDLC, or where we go in and teach people about how to use GitHub Actions, for example. It's the full breadth of everything that is in there, and that's the role that we have at Xebia.
Yeah, at Xebia, we do, aside from a lot of GitHub work, and we also are global verified partner of the year, GitHub partner of the year, last year and this year. We also do cloud transformations. We have an academy, for training, etc. So yeah, we can cover all of your needs. But yeah, let's get to it, right? So why are we here? Yeah, so maybe you have read this in the page on our website on this webinar, but main takeaways here is: are you recognizing any of these situations, like you have low adoption of GitHub Copilot, and you want higher adoption, you want to increase that, you want to increase engagement? So that is really could be a reason that you're here. Maybe yeah, you looked around the landscape and you're looking where to start. You're working inside of a company with a lot of different kinds of developers, how to get them all onboarded, how to take them along the journey using GitHub Copilot to improve your SDLC and your processes. And the last one is about learning best practices for scaling out after the POV. So you got started at your company, people liked it, but now what, right?
Yeah.
So it's a tool, but a tool, a fool with the tool is just
That's still true.
yeah, it's still true. It also applies to Copilot. So this tool comes really to grow, and it will provide you benefit once you start driving adoption and helping people use the tool in the right way, and also analyzing where can the tool play a role. But because it's not just programming, right? We have seen that a lot of times.
And it is. We've seen a lot of customers struggle with this of, okay, we did a successful small team implementation. We think we know where the value is. How the heck are we going to scale this up to the rest of the organization as well? How do we make this bigger? And this is why we always start with this, right? This was always the story that we've seen back in the day in 2023. The CEO of GitHub already said, hey, with AI at every step, we will actually finally have 10x developers. This was always the marketing story that we had there. And we're consultants and engineers ourselves, right? We know where the things go wrong, and this is very nice for the sales part. But getting to that point and actually making sure that people know how to use these tools and get the benefit out of that, that's quite a different story by itself. So we assume that you're sort of in that stage as well, as Fokko already explained. Hey, you've seen the expectations for the gains that you can get with that. How we're actually going to translate into the way that we do this at our company ourselves. Because that is exactly what you see happening, right? So low adoption rates, we've seen those conversations. Everybody got a license, but nobody's using it, for example. Or only half of the population within your company are actually doing certain things there. Or even worse, management that comes back to you and say, where's the ROI for this thing? You promised us 10x developers, but we're still struggling with X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, and we want to see metrics on how Copilot is helping us. How does it increase productivity of developers? But yeah, during this session, you will see that, you know, this is not the only thing where you can measure ROI, and maybe it's really a bad thing to measure ROI based on developer productivity with Copilot.
And let's start there as well, right? Let's start first to see if you recognize these common mistakes that we have seen in the field as well. We've helped quite a lot of companies with this, and they bump into this left and right all the time. The second part of the session, we'll talk a little bit about how do we use this then to our benefit to actually implement and roll this out in a good way instead of just falling into all of the pits that are there. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the success factors, really the things that help you make a success out of your internal enablement for this. So let's start there, common mistakes. This is really where we went and looked at each other and said, huh, what are they doing? We know that this stuff doesn't work, so it helps to reiterate on some of those things as well, so that you have an idea of what happens there as well. And these are things we've heard at customers or people that we've been talking with of how they approach GitHub Copilot. And this is probably very familiar to you, similar to what Svok already said. If you have a tool, it's not necessarily that you know how to work with the tool and the things that happen there as well. Similar here, right? You get a new hammer. You don't go to a training to see what a new hammer is. And this is often the disconnect that you see with management and the actual engineers. Engineers know that this is not just a hammer. This really has a profound impact on the way of working. Even your day-to-day of how you approach building code itself, your role will probably change in there. And us as engineers, we see that happening.
I would say that the comparison maybe is better if you would say, okay, we're in a classical workshop with hand tools, and the second time where we have a full machine doing all of the work, you know, all the cutting, the carving, the machining. You need instructions on how to work with it, which materials go best with the machine. So that's maybe a better
And
comparison.
Copilot is not even just a pneumatic hammer. It is just voicing, this is what I want you to build me a table, and then you hope for the love of everything that it actually will build you a table without doing some weird things in the middle as well. And this happens as well, right? We get a lot of questions of, okay, how can we measure the ROI of GitHub Copilot? And then we push back and say, do you actually measure the ROI of your editor? No, why would we? Well, Copilot is even less expensive often than what people pay for some editors. And still we have this discussion all the time. So this is probably something that sounds very familiar to you. What we've seen happen, and this is something that I've really learned and internalized for myself as well, is that we forget that this is quite a hefty tool. It has big impact on the way that you work, which means that you really need to acknowledge the learning curve here as well. And I've gone through this myself. We've been training thousands of people on GitHub Copilot. And this, what I have here on the screen, is a journey of my own learnings that I had my several aha moments during the time over a period of 6 months. So even people that live and breathe with these tools every single day, we operate them, we still have a learning curve where you go, oh, but I didn't know I could do that. Or somebody else shows you something and you go, oh, that is a nice way to implement this.
And even later on the process, right?
Yep.
We have been using this for over 2 years, I think now. And even now, we still learn. And not only because there are new features built into the tools, but also because you're discovering new ways of applying GitHub Copilot in certain situations, or certain prompting techniques that work very well. There is so much to learn from. So.
And it's even worse now because it just went faster and faster and faster. So keeping up to date is then the next phase as well. So this is even just the onboarding and getting started part. There's even more to it. So I recorded a whole series of mini videos of the 9 levels of enlightenment, as I call them, the little aha moments that I had for myself as a trainer that gives people training on these tools as well. And I actually went to the effort of splitting this out. This is the duration of every video that is there. So just to give an indication, 9 mini videos about that is more than 1 hour and 20 minutes of content of internal lessons that I've learned for myself. To get more value out of the tools or to operate them in a better way, for example. So there's quite a lot of things that you can learn here. And this is what happens when we give people these kinds of new tools. They need to internalize, hey, this actually has a profound impact on the way that we work. This changes the way that we do certain things. This even changes the way that we approach code by itself differently as well. And that is something that they will need to absorb in their own minds as well. And that will probably take some time. For me, it took me 6 months, but another engineer probably has a different time there where this heavily depends on how they use the tool, how they talk about these tools as well, because we tend to learn as humans from each other, for example. So your mileage may vary there of how long it takes to actually figure out how you can apply the new tools to your own way of working. And that brings us to some of the common mistakes that we see. So really the things we've talked to with customers where they made these kinds of mistakes as well. And it seems to be like a common pattern that we see every time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you don't do any enablement, you just throw the tools at the developer. Here you go, enjoy it. There might be some, very good people that will do research, that will review blogs, watch videos, and learn how to use it properly. But probably most of them will maybe not use it even at all. We have seen that in adoption, that people will just accidentally run into the code completion, but then chat and agentic, it's all not happening for them. So then you wonder, okay, we're throwing licenses at them. We pay for licenses. We're wondering where our ROI is. But yeah, if you don't enable them, there will be very little ROI.
And that's the way that we work with engineers these days, right? We have high expectations of them. They're usually highly paid employees as well.
And highly knowledgeable.
And we ask them to build stuff.
Yeah.
Their output, their business value tends to be in adding features to a code base. And that is where all the focus goes to. So what happens if you give them a new license where they A, know that this is a new tool and they need to absorb it, or B, they even start to worry about, will I actually have a job in a year because this thing is promoted in the media like this will take my job. They have no incentive to start using it. They just are being valued on their output, which is features. So what are they going to do? Build features.
Yep.
So this is really where we see a lot of things mishappening. Because we don't enable engineers at all. We don't give them the time to absorb this. We don't give them the time to learn this. And we've seen quite a lot of customers approaching this that way, either by just handing out the license or doing a minimal amount of training, showing a little bit of how you can use the tools, and then they stop there, for example.
Yeah, and then there's the focus on productivity, right? So everybody is focusing how much productivity can I gain by giving Copilot licenses to people. And yeah, I think and we'll go over that later on about what part of the productivity is actually focused on coding. And there is so much more you do as a developer apart from actually writing code, outputting lines. And then the question is, how do you measure productivity, right?
That's been an ongoing discussion for decades now in our industry.
Are you really going to measure lines of code? We have seen that using code coverage, right?
Yeah.
When there is some KPI in place to have code coverage at 80%, you know what kind of tests I'm going to write, right?
The ones that make sure that you hit that number.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just do an assert true at the end. And then I cover the code, I do a call to my method, and I don't care what the outcome is. And then I have code coverage, right?
Yeah.
So and the same goes for this. If they are going to measure the amount of lines outputted and they increase in that, of course, then I'll just ask add an additional Copilot instruction.
Yeah.
When you're finished, duplicate the amount of lines of code while retaining the same output, right? There's a lot you can do to achieve this.
There's quite a lot where we can discuss indeed on productivity as well.
Yeah. So
the next one's also very interesting. We've seen that as well. We constantly have the discussion with customers on who are we actually going to give this tool to. Do we only give this to seniors because they know how stuff works? They're very scared of giving this to juniors, for example. Which is odd because juniors can use this tool to expedite their learning, for example, quite a lot if you approach this in the right way. We've seen it where they say, hey, you're an engineer, you will get the tool, but if you're a tester, you won't get the tool. All sorts of weird discussions, so we're not treating our employees equal even at all. Whereas we're all engineers, we need to come together, build code together, and have a solution that we can deploy to production, and then still monitor and understand what is happening there. So the focus on individuals strikes us as really, really odd as well.
Yeah. Approach it as a team thing, right?
It has impact for the entire team.
Exactly. and maybe not even only the engineers, but also a product owner or a scrum master that needs to have certain insights of or is curious about stuff, right? Give them the same tool.
And give them the same training so that they know what will change in the team. We've seen a lot of focus on productivity, which then dials down to writing code. And we see that writing code is no longer the bottleneck with these kinds of tools. The code part is relatively easy because Copilot can do that for you. So the next bottleneck tends to be reviewing the code, making sure that the stuff we're shipping to production makes sense to us as humans, because guess what happens when it is broken in production? They're going to call us.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, the next one is skipping culture, things like impact, equality. We think culture has impact. If, for example, you're in a company that has a culture where everybody is very much awaiting and doesn't show a lot of initiative, it requires a lot more effort to get them engaged in this process. I think it's really important to be aware about that.
And also what we tend to see with these things as well, it's basically the same that we had when we did Agile and when we did DevOps as well. These kinds of tools will only show you and enlarge the things you already have. So if you have low trust in your team or low trust in the code base that you have, this will just put a laser focus on it, because AI will perform less probably with this or make more mistakes, and then you push that to production and they will find you because you added some bugs in production. So that cultural aspect of what do we need to have the trust to go to production, that is massively with these tools as well. So if you have low standards there right now, there's no amount of AI that can fix that. And that is the culture part that is so important. If you have the internal culture of we want to push to production with confidence, we want to have high quality code that we push to production as well, then this tool can actually help you. But if you're not there yet, then skipping that part of the enablement is really important as well. And that's the same with the follow-up here as well. We tend to see that people get a training, if they get a training. Sometimes you just, here's your YouTube video, go and watch that, and then you're enabled. And then we expect magic, of course, to happen. You're now a 10x developer. If you don't follow that up with extra trainings on top of that, even training sessions where you go in and see how people are applying these new tools, then you're just hoping that they will figure this out by themselves. And that is where the follow-up comes from, of diving deeper into certain things, offering them more help, and also keeping track of updates. Because this world moves so fast, you really need to switch, there's also a cultural aspect, into this is a continuous motion where we learn from each other, we learn from the industry, we learn from new features, and you start implementing that as well.
Yeah, and the last one is about holistic view. Of course, you can see Copilot as a coding assistant. That is how GitHub introduced it in the beginning. Your AI coding assistant, but it's so much more than that. And if you don't have an holistic view, if you don't see the bigger picture of how Copilot can inject AI into your SDLC, then you're missing out, right? So it already starts at the ideation phase, where Copilot can help you ping back and forth ideas and think about architecture, major non-functional requirements, up until the point that it runs in production, and you can provide it logs from production where errors occur to help you reduce your MTTR. So see Copilot as something that will have influence on the entire SDLC, on your entire product flow. And if you don't have it, you're not seeing the whole picture.
And it is, the focus tends to be on writing code again.
Yeah.
And not on requirements engineering and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's so much more benefits if you start enabling your product owner, your stakeholders, your scrum masters even.
Yeah. Helping out on documentation. Well, let's move on to the next one.
And this is the input we get back when we ask engineers, hey, you've gotten a Copilot license. You've been using this for 2 or 3 months, we hope. But how do you see that? How do you feel like you're actually enabled from your organization? Did they actually support you with this? We get the same stuff back as well. There's either no training or go watch this YouTube video, for example. And for some people that is fine, but there's definitely a lot of people that want to have a proper training session where they can ask questions, start spelunking with certain things. They want to have some hands-on in there. And we've seen all these things, even up to the point of we're not using GitHub, so why would we use GitHub Copilot? So there's definitely some evangelism that you can do there of explaining this is a tool from a vendor, yes, but you don't necessarily need to live with your code base on github.com, for example. This works perfectly fine if you're running on Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, GitLab, give it a name, because a lot of these tools run in the IDE itself, for example. Yes, there's more integrations on GitHub, but that usually comes later. It starts with everything that we have available in the editor itself. The one that I find still strange that people say only part of the team got a license. We've already talked about how much impact this has on the entire team and everything even surrounding it. Even your stakeholders will see that this has an impact. So just giving a part of the team a license is really, really strange to me. And we see that as well with the trainings that are there, and especially if people only see the sales and marketing pitches that are there, they will talk about, okay, but this stuff is magic. I can actually throw things at it, it will spit something back to me, and most of the time that seems correct. But that most of the time, you're hoping that an engineer will actually notice that that is the case, even though that is also in the news. People just trip over that because usually it tends to be fine 2 or 3 or 4 times, but somewhere down the line there will be something sneaky where it is not correct. So if you don't have that right expectation and understanding of what these tools can do and where they lack, then you might describe this as a black box magic stuff will happen, and potentially then feeding into the fear of this thing can do my job, which is also an interesting aspect of this whole situation with embedding AI in the SDLC. So we try to focus on those kinds of things as well with enablements of how do we show them the actual real picture of what it is and what it is not, so that it becomes more than that glorified IntelliSense that we have here in the corner. Because that has nothing to do with what Copilot itself does, for example. There's so much more that you can leverage this for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's move on to the rollout and enablement here. So we identified the common mistakes that we saw, and now based on those mistakes, we're going to take a look at how you can approach this and how you can prevent these common mistakes.
Yep.
Let's take it away.
And the way that we really look at this as this is part of a journey. You're going somewhere, so it helps if you have a little bit of a vision of this is what we foresee happening inside of our organization, how we approach certain things. So you can already foresee some of the impact, for example, that these tools have on our way of working. And especially, for example, things like this will no longer be just about code creation. There's so much more around just writing code, where the benefits are as well. So that's part of the journey of learning those kinds of things, having a long-term vision of which direction are we going into, so that you can use that as well to put up a strategy of this is how we're going to approach this. This is the current phase that we're in. Probably the next phase will be this one, but we're going to learn first from what we're doing here. Because this is not a one-off thing that you do in 3 weeks. There's definitely quite a learning curve here, as we already said. And to be honest, you're never done with the learning curve. We see that ourselves as trainers as well.
But at some point you're at a level that you can confidently work with GitHub Copilot, and I think that's an important one. In different surveys, we quite regularly ask, how confident are you in using GitHub Copilot? And then we give them a range, from not confident to somewhat confident to neutral to confident to very confident. And this also gives away something about where you are in your curve, in your adoption curve, in your learning curve with the people you're training. So yeah, let's take a look at how you can approach this. This is our approach. So we divide it into 5 different blocks. The first is a proof of concept, of course, where we will take a look at the success factors, of course. It's a very important one, and also immediately a very difficult one, because you don't know what you have yet. So and that's what it's going to deliver.
That's why we have that in here as well, right? Because customers come to us and say, here, we're going to do an enablement, and then we'll have 10x engineers. Yeah. And we're consultants, so we start pushing back on that, and then we say, okay, but what does that mean? 10x more lines of code, 10x more bugs in production. What do you actually want to get out of this? And that needs to be very clear when you start doing this phase as well. So we need to define the measure of success first.
Yeah, and maybe even multiple measures of success.
Yeah.
So divided over different axes. And indeed, how do we measure that? And that's the next very difficult question, right? You could say, well, let's take a look at the amount of PRs that we output. But if you're really going to let developers know that you're going to measure the amount of PRs, you know what's going to happen, and that's every time. I have had a discussion with a customer that was really interesting, and they had a lot of work in their run into their operate part of their work, right? So they had a lot of support calls, operational stuff. And then it becomes maybe an interesting metric to see the mean time to repair, right? Or the mean time to recover. You have an issue in production, you need to solve it. Copilot can help that in a lot of ways, right? And the question is, how much can you reduce that time to recover by using Copilot? But then, of course, with everything, you first need the first measurement without Copilot. And a lot of companies don't have that. So that's already a challenge generally.
And then even that immediately goes into discussion of, yes, this is nice, but that means we have the measurement and we have somebody on staff that is on call, that when something happens, they will drop everything and they start working on that.
Yeah.
If you don't have that and every engineer is swamped with building new features, then this immediately exposes your way of working of, you can't even answer this question right now correctly.
And that's what you said earlier, right? It all emphasizes the problems that you already have. So if you're clear on that, then... and the last one is, how does it fit in our existing DevOps processes or into our existing SDLC, right? Copilot can help with coding, but there is so much more that it can do. And I think it's a good thing that already during a proof of concept to identify the integration points of Copilot in your SDLC, because then you're going to see where it makes impact. And maybe you already have an idea of where your biggest bottlenecks are in the process, right? And to already identify, okay, can Copilot help here or not? And how big is our bottleneck? Can we measure that bottleneck? So
and that tends to be how we approach POCs or proof of values, given a name, as well as how can we actually measure that this brings success? And one of those things tends to be, if I ask you to drop Copilot tomorrow, will you be happier or less happier than you're today? And if we can get to that point, we can already say, hey, we see that engineers see the benefit there. So that is the starting point of they're using the tools and they see what is happening there. And then we can go into, okay, but how can we then leverage this in a better way?
Yeah.
Even up to, hey, your SDLC has a problem here. Your review process might be slow, or our mean time to repair from bugs in production is slow. How can we then inject AI into that part of the process to try to do something? Yep. We can automatically use Copilot to do triaging on errors in production, for example.
Yep.
That can save you so much time already in that part of the SDLC, making the feedback loop even quicker. And that's what we try to do in those kinds of phases as much as possible.
Or do the basic code review, because a lot of code reviewing stuff is on linting rules and is on nitpicking stuff, and not so much about the real value. So what was required in the user story or whatever you use as a basis for the change, and if that reflects what was implemented. And even there, I think Copilot can play a role. Right, so next step is preparation. So to be able to start, we generally do a scaled enablement, right? Because generally we are bigger customers with hundreds or even thousands of developers. We can't do that. We don't scale, right? If it's just the two of us at the customer and they have 5,000 developers, we can't provide all of these trainings that these developers need. And we already said we're not going to provide them a video and say good luck with it, right? So we tend to identify champions, and a champion is a person that has above average knowledge on Copilot in this case. We would educate them, and they would be responsible for the adoption, or at least a part of the adoption at the customer. So you need to identify these people, and ideally also have a coordinator for them. Because the point is, if you have a group of people, who is going to take initiative, right? If you need to get together or you need to change a process, somebody needs to coordinate or at least plan a meeting together, right? So that's an important one. And also set the expectation that they have a certain responsibility, that they will be required to show initiative, and also to reserve additional time, because that's a lot of times that's an issue, right? So, and then we get the question back, hey, how much time do you expect them to be spending on this? Generally, we say 2 to 4 hours a week, right?
Yep.
So make sure that they have this time reserved and they know what to do, what their role is. But they also need help. So let's get to the champions part, because that's where we really put effort into these champions. We train them, of course. We have several trainings available for them to become GitHub Copilot experts. They need this knowledge also for them to be reassured that they can actually provide value to their colleagues. They need to take ownership, and I cannot emphasize this enough. This is so difficult. They need to feel like they are the ones responsible for adoption and to bring new information to their colleagues. That's really a challenge. We have seen this. Yeah.
And that's also why that coordinator plays a part as well, right? So you need to almost approach this like a project. If you know that you need to train 300 people, then you need to make a schedule for that. You need to free up the champions from the day-to-day work so that they have the time available to start doing this.
Reserve rooms. Find the cohorts of people you're going to train, because that also requires alignment with the different teams, with the different team leads on their availability. That's quite a challenge. And then the rollout starts. That means users need to be enabled. They need to get a license. They need to know how to get training. They need to be informed. So usually we set up a wiki, we set up a Teams channel or a Slack channel or whatever tool the customer has available. We do usage tracking. So we take a look at how the adoption grows. There are metrics available from GitHub to see adoption, to see how much people are using inline completions, how much people are actually using chat, which models are used, which IDEs are used. There are so many indicators already, certainly in this adoption phase, to take a look at. You know, we have seen old IDEs that do not support a lot of features. We even had surprises of certain IDEs being used while we're rolling out versus a very specific IDE. So usage tracking is an important indicator, and it should be a feedback loop towards the champions to steer their efforts towards the user community.
And that's also how we use the usage metrics as well. They can be a signal back to the champions, as you said, but also for these are the editors that are being used. These are the teams that are not using it in the same way other teams are, because there can be reasons for that. I've seen people that had a online implementation of VS Code running somewhere else, and they were not allowed to enable the Copilot extension in there, for example. Simple little things like that. So while you are doing the project-based rollout and you're tracking usage, and then all of a sudden you see a whole group of your organization not using that, that should be a feedback loop to the champions first, because they are your eyes and ears in the community. Asking, hey, can we somehow figure out what is happening so that we can go back and help those folks? Should always be reaching out a hand with asking for how can I help you, versus coming back and saying you're not being productive enough, we don't see the gains, and then maybe take away the license. Yeah. That's how we approach this as trainers as well, right? We're here to help people start understanding these tools because there's probably good benefit in it for them.
Yeah, and the same goes for premium requests. No. There's so much going on for premium requests, a lot of unclarity of how it works. So this is something to be defined upfront, right? How you approach premium requests. If you're going to provide additional budgets for people going over the out-of-the-box premium request units that are available from your license. And it can also be an indicator of power users. So we do look at dashboards on premium request usage, who is first to deplete them, right? Because there can be there can be probably more reasons, but there can be two important reasons. One is somebody was really happy with one of the premium models, be it maybe Cloud Opus 4.6, although maybe a little bit slow, it was solving all his problems. And that depleted his or her premium request units very fast. Or it is somebody that is really a power user, and then you will see probably somebody alternate between a lot of different models to get the most benefit from the power of each model. So yeah, premium request units definitely worthwhile to take a look at for adoption.
And that's why we have aftercare in here, because that is the feedback loop that goes basically back into the first part as well of, okay, we're now going to start with a newer group. How can we enable them with all the lessons learned that we've had so far?
Yeah.
So now that we've seen some of the common mistakes, hopefully that rang a bell with you. We've seen how we approach rollout and enablement as well. And then I think the biggest one is what factors do we see from the field of what can make this a success? And focusing on them to get you the most benefit out of these rollout and enablement programs as well. Because that's the goal, right? You want to sit back on that mountain, look back at the amazing things you've achieved, looking back at the journey you've done and thinking, well, this has been at least a cool journey. We've achieved a lot of things, and there's always room to grow, right? There's always that other mountain that you want to climb as well, that you want to achieve.
True. Yeah, so there are several factors contributing to this, right? So the first thing, and we discussed it already, is focus to enable entire teams, not individuals. An entire team is enabled. We have really had questions about people saying, hey, my colleague in the same team, he has a license, I don't. Why has that choice been made? I want to license as well. How do I get it? Yeah, come on, make sure that you enable the entire team so they can start adopting together, learn from each other, start pair programming together to see how others are applying the tool. That's really, really powerful. Sharing stories, that's a really important one. We have seen lots of examples from this, ranging from very simple ones to more advanced ones. We have seen at customers where people would really actually print their the way they used Copilot for a certain use case, put that on the wall in their coffee room to share it with their fellow teammates. Sometimes you have a very specific use story, like for example, you're using plant UML, and Copilot can, because it's text, it can read and write plant UML. And maybe you have a very good use case for that. So yeah, share that, share stories from the trenches. Because that appeals to people. They like it a lot to see how you're actually using it.
And that's how we see that between us as trainers as well. We see that happen all the time. When you give a demo and I haven't seen it yet, and I go, oh, that's a novel use case. I haven't thought of that. Yeah. And diagrams is one of those things where you really open up people's eyes of, okay, but I can do more. Yeah. We've had architects that gave back their license saying, I'm an architect, I do everything in PowerPoint, I don't need it. And then you show them, okay, but Draw.io, for example, text base. Here's an example of read my cloud resource groups out of the CLI that we have, plot them into a diagram and make something nice out of that, because I want to explain that we're going to make a change from container-based services to a full-fledged SaaS service. What will be the differences? Yeah. And then a couple of minutes later, you see those people go, wow, I don't have to do all that stuff anymore myself. Yeah. So sharing those kinds of stories, that is where the biggest benefit is. And that's also why we say focus on the teams and the community around that. Because that's how we as humans still learn. We need to see that somebody else does it, and then the light bulb goes off, and then you actually have a moment of enlightenment.
Yeah, lead by example.
Yeah.
Yeah. So measure impact. I think that's a really important one, and certainly if you can share the impact that you have been able to measure.
And feed that back to the team.
Yeah,
if you see
and
that
not only to the team, but also to the entire organization. Yeah. If you have a big win with Copilot, right? You reduce your MTTR or anything else, yeah, share that, because that's a great motivator for everybody to use it as well.
And use it again as a point of discussion as well. Hey, we see that the amount of pull requests goes up, but the size of them is going down. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Probably in my DevOps mindset, yes, that is, because now I have small changes that I can actually embrace and cross what is in there.
Yeah.
Versus we only do a pull request every once a week with 10,000 changes in there. I can never achieve of understanding what is in there. So that kind of impact and just making it part of the discussion. It's not something that is good or bad. It's just, hey, we notice this. Do we actually see this as a team?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? How do you feel about it? Should we guard against this type of behavior, for example? And all of a sudden you see then team members chatting to each other about how we produce code, which is in some teams already quite a big win as well. So measure that and share that with the team so that they can learn from that as well.
Yeah, the enthusiastic champions. That's that's indeed a very important one, and it's so hard to predict how a champion will behave. But yeah, once they are enthusiastic and you have the right people as a champion, it really helps if they share their own stories. That's a little bit overlap with the previous one, but yeah, still. Inform them on beforehand, collect your stories. And maybe for you it's something simple, right? But for others it might be something like a revelation or aha moment. They will use their own tech stack. I mean, we generally do demos in VS Code, but we see quite a lot of users. They are on the JetBrains editors, or they are using the full Visual Studio, and they have another world they live in. Maybe they use another programming language. It always helps to show things with people's own tech stack. Take SQL developers. That's also a very specific tech stack, and there is a plugin now for SQL Server Management Studio for Copilot. So yeah, try to tie into their world. They can, enthusiastic champions can relate to internal engineers, so they know what kind of challenges they face, they know the environment, so this really helps. That's the simple one. Authenticity, the fact that you make yourself vulnerable, you also show your the mistakes that you make or the wins that you came across.
And that helps with the learning. That's how we learn as people as well. If it's a rehearsed story, then usually the connection isn't there, and then the aha moment usually isn't there either. And that's the fun part of using internal engineers for champions as well. They know the pain points of their environments. They can make those silly jokes around that as well. And they always need to tell this from their own story of this is how I learned to do this. Oh yeah, and one time I did something wrong and I bumped my head and now it hurts. All those kinds of little things, that makes it a learning experience then.
Yeah, and indeed, when you do a demo, don't necessarily provide a polished demo, but don't worry if things go wrong, because that happens to all of us.
And we even use that in our trainings, right? I try something out and then I hope that I can discuss what the expectation will be of my prompt, and then something else happens.
Yeah.
Now we have a learning moment because these things are non-deterministic. We can explain that. We try to embrace that as much as possible.
Yeah. And the last one is, I cannot emphasize this enough, have in-person contact. We have seen so many Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, Google Meet meetings. You just don't get the same engagement and value from these meetings versus an in-person meeting. So when you do sessions, try to get together in person and get people engaged, make them part of your experience, of your story, and that helps so much. Right.
Because that helps indeed with how you approach these things as well. And that's why we have this slide in here as well. If you haven't seen anything about this, then I can highly recommend looking into that. This is one of the sort of red lines throughout our entire DevOps careers as well. How do you approach these kinds of tools? We already said this has a profound impact in the way that you work. And Carol Dweck is one of the university professors in the US that has really made a whole study about how do you approach certain things. And it's all about mindset. It is about, hey, if I do something and it doesn't work, then there's value in that because I've learned that it doesn't work there. versus I will never try this because I have no idea what the result will be, so you're stuck in your own setup. So that's where the term growth mindset actually comes from. She's done massive studies with this on seeing how people learn by doing certain things, and sometimes that really holds you back as well. So there's a whole study that you can do with that. The link is in the slides, so you can find that later on. Because that also then leads us to, we see these tools as being part of the developer experience. That is the mindset that we look at these things. And the developer experience is all about how can a developer in their day-to-day work actually do their work. And it's a combination of these things. So productivity is a thing that you can look at, but it's also just a way of describing, I should say, how people think they're actually being productive. And we've had that notion for years with developers, right? If I tap you on the shoulder while we're working together and say, do you have a minute? I break your concentration, and that will probably take you 20 minutes to get back into whatever you were doing. Probably even longer if I start to have a conversation and actually interrupt you for quite a long while as well. So this all goes about how do you feel like you're being productive? Can you stay in the zone? What is the impact you have on the systems that we're building together? And then how happy are you with everything that you're trying to do for the company? Because you can make the most beautiful solution while you're working on something, but if somebody behind you is working with a jackhammer and making a lot of noise, your satisfaction will probably drop.
Yep.
So all of those things together is what we call the developer experience, which goes back to how easy is it for you and how enjoyable even to do your work. Because that is where it is. So that even goes back to where are the things that hold you back in your environment. Is your cloud development, cloud deployment, is that slow, for example? That might become a burden and a hurdle to get over. And that all entails the view of looking at it from a developer experience viewpoint. Because that leads to, hey, we can actually see what is happening with these kinds of tools. And this is a deck slide that we use from GitHub itself, but this comes from quite an extensive research that they did with a couple of hundred folks of really measuring them of what do we see happening here when we have these tools. We can see that developers stay longer in the flow state, so they can contribute more solution or functional code back into production, for example. So they feel at least like they're making an impact in whatever they are trying to do. We don't have to spend that much time anymore on every single if case that is there. You start changing the way that you think about those things because your engineering value is no longer in writing code itself. No, it's around solving the actual engineering problems that we have. So this is real numbers that you see going up when you start measuring them properly as well. And this is the biggest one indeed. Why we always talk about productivity and things like that. When you start asking programmers and engineers what they actually do on a day-to-day basis, and you ask them how much time can you actually spend on writing code, then over 50% of the engineers that you ask, and this was extensive research in 2019 of a couple of thousand open source maintainers, they actually indicated, if I have a full day of work, I can actually spend around, maybe if I'm lucky, 2 hours on a given day of actually producing that code. So we're trying to optimize and calculate the ROI of producing code for the 2 hours a day that we actually do that. And we don't incorporate the 6 other hours on normal working days of 8 hours that people are actually producing code as well. Because if you then start asking them on what they're trying to do for the other parts of their day, it's always meetings. That's especially now these days, everybody has 3 different meetings going on at the same time. They're looking at specs, they're looking at documentation. Do we actually have something from an incoming SDK that we need to figure out of? We're doing reconnaissance on certain things. Oh, and then we get the call in the middle saying, hey, there's something happening on production, drop everything you're doing, go focus on that. So there's so much more that engineers do that we also need to take a proper look at how can we enable them for that part of their work as well. So that is how we look at these things as well. These are massive contributors to look at to really bring success to these efforts. We already talked about team and community effects of really using that as well. We talked about the enthusiastic champions, but also that growth mindset. That is really a cultural thing that needs to be there. Because otherwise, we can tell you, it will just highlight the problems that you already have.
Yeah.
We talked about developer experience, looking at activities outside of writing code. And for us, this all comes back to what we call engineering culture. It's a broad topic, and there can be a whole webinar of an hour around that. But these are some of the pillars that we've described at Xebia as this is engineering culture. It goes from epic workplace to state-of-the-art software to smooth delivery into production, for example. So this encompasses quite a lot of different aspects of writing code yourself, up into, hey, we need to get it into the hands of our customers and they need to make sure that it works and that there's no bugs in there, for example. So there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that. But as I said, it's quite a hefty topic that is there. So I recommend grab the ebook. The link will be shared as well. Because there you can really learn on what is in that and how do we talk about those kinds of things as well and how Copilot ties into that. Because if you look at how we approach Copilot as well, we always have three main axes here. You can see them as vertical swim lanes in here. So we always start with how to get people licenses. How do we look at governance around which features do we actually enable? Did we talk to legal and security around that? Can we actually do these kinds of things? How soon can we embed things into our policies when some new functionality comes out? Do we wait until it goes GA? How do we even stay up to date for new models and things like that?
Yeah.
So then we have a whole training program that includes giving the training, preferably in person, so that we can really look at people and see how they absorb this, and so that we can have the follow-up conversations afterwards as well, because that's for me usually what I lack in online meetings. And then we always have in purpose here hackathons. Get people's hands on these tools and have experienced proctors walking around helping them understand of how this applies to it. We've been in hackathons where people had the first 2 trainings. They did a one-shot prompt, said build me a game, do something in this realm, let's build tic-tac-toe. And then 5 minutes later they just put their hands up and said, well, I built tic-tac-toe, I've accomplished the goal here. So that's why we walk around as proctors and help them forward of maybe you can approach this a little bit differently. Maybe we can make something fun happen here. Maybe we can go to the next step there as well.
Or maybe we can have it test driven, right?
All those things.
There is so much you can ask, right? So
documenting, do it asynchronously. There's so much.
Do you have
extra
2 players
things.
or is it a single player?
No.
Yeah. And again, these hackathons, make sure they are in person, because this contributes so much to the experience for these people. So yeah.
Make it an event. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do as well. So we tend to bring prizes, even something silly like we bring stickers over so that people can identify with Copilot. Stickers always work. But we always do a report out where people very proudly show this is what we have built in this hackathon. So that other people then go, oh, but we did the minimal effort thing and we could have done so much more. Yeah. And we tie them to business goals as well, right? So we ask teams what hurts the most. Can we do a hackathon around that topic and see how far we can get? Did you already use something like custom instructions in your repository? If not, let's see how far we can get and automating some of the manual tasks that we have by setting that up. Yeah. So the training part is pretty big on purpose.
Yeah, and generally we do greenfield scenarios in hackathons, and that allows people to experiment in a much safer way than when you do that in a brownfield scenario. So.
And during that, we start feeding the community. So that's why we have the office hours on the right. Give people a place where they can ask questions and be helped. Yeah. Give them a place with the champions, for example, where the champions can do internal demos of, hey, I've done the most amazing thing last week. This is what I've done, and this is how I approach certain things. Yeah. Because that really helps to make this a thing that is really coming alive as well. Yeah. And then at the bottom we have still the engagement metrics and the community, where we really start to focus on, are people actually using these tools? And how are they using the tools? What can team A learn from team B? Can we bring them together for a hackathon, for example, and do something together? And that is how you start building up a community that can learn continuously from each other.
Or record the video with one of the community members, right? Yep. They discovered a really nice way of working, and then do an interview with them and let them show what they discovered.
And that goes back even to the next level. This tends to be the first steps into starting to use Copilot. We train a lot of people so that they know the basics that are there. But then we also now see a shift happening on top of that as well, because we still ask quite a lot from engineers. They need to know everything, right? They need to be focused on unit testing and TDD if they have that implemented. They need to be DevOps experts. They need to be able to see diagnostics in production and figure out what is happening. They need to do the entire SDLC. And on top of that, know things like Kubernetes, cloud deployments, everything. And now we shove them another tool in their stack saying, okay, this is what you now need to absorb as well. Copilot is then another one in the mix.
Yeah.
So what we tend to see is that we now see a split between what we call AI native engineers, where they're really on the front edge of everything that is happening. They're figuring out if this helps their way of working. And the split between normal, basically now these days, AI-enabled engineers that know how to use these tools, know how to start a agentic session where an agent will start doing certain things for them, know how this integrates into the pull request process, and they know still the DevOps basics of the pull request process is where you do your integration test and things like that, for example. So that split is happening as well, and there we start to focus on how can we then enable an AI native engineer to embed themselves for a shorter period of time with a team, so that they can come in with that vision of how can we now enable this team to get to the next level of using these tools. Because the team might not have seen that last week all of a sudden we can do skills in Copilot, just to give it a name. Or there's an extension to the Copilot CLI where you can just inject everything from the awesome Copilot repository right into your repository with an agentic workflow basically. So the AI native engineers tend to be on top of that news, and they're really in that team helping out, getting them to the next level. Because the AI enabled engineers know how to work with that and how to apply those tools. So then after a shorter period of time, tends to be 6 weeks or 2 months, for example, the AI native engineer goes back and starts helping out another team. So then all of a sudden we have the champions back again. That could be that role that just go over as a traveling engineer that helps teams out with implementing the next level, which then feeds back to the metrics that we use as well of which teams are actually even customizing their way that they work with Copilot. Do they have custom prompts? Do they have their own agents? Do they actually kick off GitHub Copilot coding agent, for example? So those kinds of things then are really measured as well and brought back into the feedback loop so that we can learn from that.
Yep.
So those are some of the lessons learned that we talked about in this webinar as well.
Yeah, we told you to share benefits of Copilot as an internal story. So sharing is really a big thing. Not only let the champions share, but also let your regular community members share stuff in all kinds of ways, in wiki articles, in videos, print out something, put it on the wall. There's so much you can do. Grow an engineering community to learn from each other. So growing a community is something that's partly happens organically, hopefully, but there is also quite a lot of steering, organize events, try to engage as much as possible the people in what you're doing, make them part of it. Then take time to absorb the new way of working. This doesn't, we're not talking about days, we're talking about months of adoption at least. And yeah, for sure, people need to learn, people need to hear, and there's always the adoption curve where you have the early adopters versus the early majority, late majority, laggards. Keep in mind that that is also there and that not everybody is adopting in the same pace. And the last one, champions need regular inspiration as well. So if you as the person that sets up these champions can provide inspiration as well, or you can send them to an event where they will get inspired, then please do so, because they are the lifeline of your Copilot initiative. They need to be enabled, they need to be inspired. And maybe a good starting point would be our tech.xebia.ms website.
Yep. We have the same issue as well, right? This goes so fast. We got over a dozen trainers in the Netherlands alone in our company that focus on Copilot. And even for us, it's very hard to stay up to date.
Yeah.
We got some folks like Foco that have been building mini videos on these are the updates of the last period in Visual Studio Code, which is amazing. That helps me so that I don't have to go into every single notification that is in there. And Reinier has helped build the tech.xebia.ms site where we group all of the news around GitHub Copilot in one place so that you don't have to become an expert into all of the different options that we have for following along. because there's editor-specific blogs, there's Copilot blogs, there's the GitHub changelog is quite big on a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff happening. This website even has a RSS feed and a mailing newsletter as well. They just groups that news together and sends it out once a week. So that makes it way easier to ingest. But at least you can stay up to date with all the sources that we use as trainers as well while we operate in this ecosystem. So with that, we're running a little bit short on time. So if you still have questions, still drop them in the Q&A. We'll answer them afterwards. I'll probably hang around for quite a while to see if there's still stuff happening so we can have a conversation there. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I hope you learned something new.
Yeah, thanks so much, and hope to see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.